Hello, and welcome to the Six Figure Developer Podcast, the podcast where we talk about new and exciting technologies, professional development, clean code, career advancement, and more. I'm John Calloway.
I'm Clayton Hunt.
And I'm John Ash.
With us today is Vaughn Vernon. Vaughn is an Wow, right off the bat, okay. Vaughn is an entrepreneur, software developer, and architect with more than 35 years of experience in a broad range of business domains. Vaughn is a leading expert in domain-driven design and reactive, and a champion of simplicity. Welcome, Vaughn.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, so before we kind of jump into the meat of things, could we just, for our listeners, would you give us a little introduction to yourself? Perhaps tell us how you got started in the industry?
Yeah, sure. So I started developing software professionally in 1983. It was a very bad time economically, right? It was, I don't know how many people around still remember that, but kind of had to beg for jobs back then, and unless you had, like 10 years experience in COBOL, CICS, it was pretty tough to get a job, especially in New York City where I was. It was all, financial stuff, so banks and stock market and so forth. So anyway, I did finally get work, and I, as I like to say, the best thing that never happened to me was that I did not get a job in COBOL, and instead I landed, in a company that, they actually used COBOL. They were working in insurance, but they were a clearinghouse and needed to install, hundreds of IBM PCs across the U.S. for in hospitals for insurance claim collections. And wow, in 1983, essentially the IBM PC had just been introduced a few years before. Hardly anyone was using it, and we're just at the the beginning of the boom. And I was programming in C within around 6 months from starting with the company, and not COBOL, and that was just great. And so my career went from that, using C on 2 floppy diskette drive to moving on to Unix development, Max 11780 and Unix System 5, and just having a lot of fun. So I got started that way. My things kind of went from C to C++ to Smalltalk, back to C++ for a while, and then Java, and I have done a fair amount of .NET development on both web and desktop. Some heavy graphics processing and display work on through C# and .NET platform. But cool. Mostly Java, JVM, Scala, and now trying to spend some more time with Kotlin.
Okay, so that kind of brings us to what are the things you're working on these days? What are the sort of problems you're solving and whatnot?
Okay, well, first of all, I spend a lot of time with clients, helping them to understand domain-driven design, training, consulting, helping them to, understand the difference between sort of, a traditional software development project and one that really interfaces a lot with the business, with business experts, domain experts. And it is a different mindset. It's a different mindset for non-technical people and technical people, because there's always been sort of that gulf between the two areas, and now trying to get them to heal those wounds and work together is a challenge. And it's also challenging just to understand the nuances of language and how human communication is so important when it comes to writing software that really reflects the human communication that we have. And we don't necessarily give a lot of thought to that until we're kind of forced to step into it and learn it and deal with the fact that this really is what Mel Conway talked about, wrote about in 1967, not published till 68 and not really recognized till somewhere early to mid 70s. And he had it right, he had it right, which proves it's true, right? Because if nobody recognizes you, no one wants to hear it, nobody believes you, you're probably doing something right. So, so yeah. Anyway, that's what it's all about. It's human communication, and if you get that right and you reflect it in your software, then Conway's law works out for you. You work well within that constraint, and if you don't, well, you're doomed. So,
yeah, and I think you're considered one of the big influential people in the domain-driven design space, and I think that all kind of ties in together with making sure that they're writing software that conforms to those ideas and communicates those ideas. Do you want to give maybe just a brief overview of your thoughts on domain-driven design?
Yeah, well, I guess I sort of did there a bit, but to go further into it, I probably was using the tenets of domain-driven design back from the early 90s, and even though it was another, more than 10 years or so until it was really introduced, the ideas came from small talk, a lot of small talk patterns, the plot community and things like that. And so just sort of the model view controller way of doing things meant that you clearly separated your business logic into a model, and you tried to make your model, understand the human dynamics of whatever your domain, sphere of knowledge was that you were working in. And so it gave you a big head start. And of course, you're using concepts like entities that are stored in a database. And so, I was doing a lot of this stuff well before. I worked on teams where we really, really, put a heavy emphasis on the language that we used. We didn't think of it as language at the time. We thought of it more as naming, but naming was a very big thing, and the expressions that we used got embedded in our source code. And so, it was all but domain-driven design. And even the bounded context, which we had no really clue about, sort of ended up, just because of the style in which we wrote software, were smaller components that had APIs between them. Com at the time was doing a lot of stuff on Microsoft Windows desktop, and so our tools talk through Com, and so we sort of had those boundaries anyway, and the language built within them, and so whenever I learned about sort of this formal idea of domain-driven design, which I had never sort of heard of, it expressed that way, but in reading it, it was just like, wow, okay. And what it actually came down to is, like, this book was now sort of like something where I could hold up when I talked to other people, and they couldn't tell me that I was a complete fool, because the things I was talking about was real, and you could read it, and you could say, look, there are other people who have a similar background, different, but using some of the same mentality and from the small talk world, and here you go, right? And now it's sort of hard to go like, oh, and even Martin Fowler wrote the foreword for that book, right? So now it's sort of like hard to say, oh, you don't know what you're talking, So yeah, but yeah, some people still do, actually. That's unfortunate.
Yeah. So I know one of the things you mentioned there, and this is just trying to sort of be a voice for folks who may not be all that familiar. But you mentioned the context or the concept of bounded context. Would you just give a little bit of a definition to understand that terminology for them?
Yeah. So when we have discussions about software, we tend to talk to people who know a certain subject matter. They're often referred to as subject matter experts. Business expert, domain expert is what Ddd calls them. Well, it's about a domain, a sphere of knowledge. And so what you do is you tend to gravitate towards certain people who have this expertise, and you have conversations about this very specific area, and you want to contain now a model within that conversational boundary that you have, where you're saying, well, when we talk about an account, it means very specifically this in this discussion, right? In this conversation that we're having with these subject matter experts, an account means this.
Yeah.
And so we're going to put a boundary around that. We're going to start collecting more language around, by conversing on this topic. And as we discover more and more language that fits into this, related conversations that we're having, then these, then we keep adding to that language. But then there's going to come a point where people start talking about an account as something maybe a little bit like what we were talking about over in this conversation, but not exactly like that. And what the mistake that most software projects, systems will make is they will try to make those multiple conceptual accounts fit together like in one place. And instead, domain-driven design says, no, they're different. So just put them in different contexts. You can call them all account, right? If there are three different sort of definitions or ways that we think about an account, then put those into separate areas where those conversations have clear boundaries. It's a context, right? And that's where that belongs. And then if you need to integrate between those, then you sort of, translate between your language and its language when you need to exchange information. And then you start to form relationships between the two teams of these, or the multiple teams of these bounded contexts. And you sort of decide, well, we're a bit more independent than they are. So if they want to exchange information with us, we'll tell them what we know about our thing, but they don't get to, we don't have to care about what they were, knowing about their side of the world. And so that puts us upstream, right? And so now we have this whole language, a modeling language, a pattern language for having these kinds of conversations, right? And integrations and collaboration. And so everybody who's working in this kind of large system, let's say we're trying to build a large system from smaller subsystems, we all know what we're talking about with each other, because I say, well, this is our language in our context, and we have an open host service and a published language that you can integrate with, but we're upstream, so we're not going to learn about your language. So if you want to, you can translate our language into your language through an anti-corruption layer, but that's not even our business, so we don't really care what you do with it. You could actually conform to our model if you want to. See, these are all just expressions, and so it just becomes as natural a language for developer, like technology and team conversations, if you will, team topologies, right? That you can see how all these concepts start to snap together. And again, it's just Conway's law. Go back to 1967, and we're just finally learning, and begging people to learn along with us and do this stuff, because this is the only way it's going to work.
Yeah, and Eagle Hansen is asking on Twitch, how has DDD evolved in the last 15 years or so? what are the do's and don'ts, and what did they have right originally? Has it changed much since earlier definitions? Has it evolved to encompass different ideas, different thoughts?
Well, of course, yes, I would say that, anyone who authors a book on DDD may have a slightly different slant on things. We all have our different kinds of ways of, our own mental models of things, and so we can influence people in certain ways. But I think the core of DDD around bounded context and the context mapping patterns and so forth are pretty much the same. There are a few new patterns around that. Eric Evans came up with something called the bubble context, which is a way of working in legacy, and not sort of being subject to a lot of pollution that's all, or tangle that's already in that legacy system. So you make this kind of bubble around that. And I think there are other things too that are maybe slightly different. You won't find, for example, domain event in Eric's book, but shortly after his book was published, then this handling event that was in there kind of stood out more and more to him. And then he started having more conversations about domain events, because events tended to be very handy in expressing things that happen, because, when you have these boundaries around, you don't want various contexts constantly pinging other contexts saying, what happened? What happened?
Yeah.
Anything happen? Instead we just go like, okay, this happened. Well, we've had that concept around for a long time, right? Sub, observer pattern, whatever. And so now it's just formalized as part of the DDD pattern language. So yeah, it's all really, I think being fine-tuned. I would say also that I think Eric talked about mostly generic subdomains, but subdomain has now come to stand out more than just a generic subdomain. It's more like subdomains are a concept of you have a problem space domain, and now there are various subdomains within that. And part of those subdomains may be in a legacy system that's just, it's implicitly there, not really explicitly in a nice boundary like you would want it to be if you had originally designed it with DDD. And so how do we deal with the fact that part of that subdomain is over here in this really kind of tangled, messy area, and we also need to have part of that implemented now in a new area? How do we, exchange information and make that look really smooth for the innovative new area of the system? So yeah, things like that. And I think probably the biggest thing that has changed is the number of different ways that tactically we use domain-driven design. And that really gets a lot of people's attention, because we're often talking to programmers about this, and they get really into the programming languages, programming paradigms. Are we doing OO? Are we doing, functional? Or are we doing whatever the paradigm of the day is, or year? And I don't say that critically. It's just that, in a sense, what matters about the tactical implementation is that people understand it and that it reflects the way people are thinking about this. Because if you use a paradigm and you write code tactically that no one can really see the business, that language in there, then who cares? Like, well, yeah, we care a lot because you did it incorrectly, right? So instead, right, whatever you use, make sure that you're making it very clear, explicit, what this model does, and that even business people, non-technical people, can look at it and say, yeah, I can totally understand that, because it reflects the way that we've been talking as a team. Tests and everything. So, but I don't think anyone really had an idea of what DDD would be like with a functional language back in 2003 or something, but now we probably think about that a lot, and And so that has changed for sure.
One of the refinements or extensions to DDD over the years has been what you call Reactive Ddd. Could you explain what that is?
Yeah, so, well, it's really just blending reactive programming. If you go to the Reactive Manifesto, it's reactivemanifesto.org, there's an explanation there that of what reactive architecture and reactive programming is about. And essentially, what it boils down to is that reactive is message driven. Okay, so at a sort of foundation, you have to say that we are sending messages from, A to B, and A to B might be something, an entity or another a bounded context or but just think of there are two components. One sends a message to another component, right? And that is the basic idea of reactive. Now, because you have this underlying foundation of message driven, it enables other characteristics of reactive, which is responsive, right? So now, because you're sending messages that don't are not strongly coupled to, some parts of the system that make it very difficult for this to scale out, and then scale back in, then it can be more responsive, because as load continues on the front end or wherever access is being made to this service, let's say, then our service is also being reactive, and it's also elastic, right? And because it's elastic, it can expand and contract as needed according to load. Well, that helps us to continue to be responsive, right? Oh, and we can remain responsive and elastic because we're resilient. Because if something goes wrong over here, how do we keep from, cascading like failure, not only across our service, but across any other services that use it? So I think a lot of people have tended to shy away from reactive because they consider it mysterious. And as soon as you say message sending, right, that it's message driven, people just go like, whoa, wait a minute, I can't handle that. But you know what I've found is, first of all, there is nothing proactive. I don't think there's anything proactive on this planet. Everything is reactive, okay? Think about it. When you say you're being proactive about something, you're not. You're reacting to something, and you think, and that's why I gave a keynote last week, and I said the title of the keynote was, how did I put that? Proactive is a lie. It's funny. Proactive is a lie. I'll remember in a second. But anyway, the point is, control is a dream. I think actually a better title would have been control is an illusion.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So now what we're admitting is we'd like to make ourselves and everybody else believe that we are proactively in control of this software. And in reality, we aren't ready for anything, right? And so what we can be ready for is that things will go wrong. And if we can think of everything that could go wrong, or at least a lot of them, then we can be prepared to react when those things go wrong. The other thing is message sending. We've been doing message sending for years. It's just that, Smalltalk was all about message sending. It doesn't mean that it has to be asynchronous. It just means that there's a decoupling between an object saying what it wants another object to do and how that object actually does that for us, right? And that is the thing, is the message is sent. And it's the same way with an interface. Just think of an interface in C# or Java or whatever as a protocol. And all that protocol says is the messages that something knows how to handle. And if you send that message to it, it will determine how it implements it. It doesn't have to tell you how it implements it. Now, where that becomes really crazy is all these getters and setters, right? The anemic, whatever way that people program all the time. Well, there hardly is really a message sent because it's obvious what's happening. You're just poking data into an object and getting data out of the object, doing things, right? We always seem to drag things up to the next level up, do something there, and then more gets dragged up to the next level above that. And then we start pushing things back down when we finally have an answer. We just set things, right? It's like, no. That's actually inverted of the way it should be. I mean, go back to any elementary object-oriented way of explanations of development. No. That's exactly the opposite of what we should do. So actually, message-driven is really familiar, and so is reactive. If you want to understand reactive, this conversation that we're having is reactive. Why? Because you asked me a question and I reacted to it. And I'm probably overreacting because I'm talking too much. But, I'm trying to help people understand themselves better, right? Look at your life. Every single thing that you do is a reaction. And also, just look at UI, right? Just look at the UI. What happens when you click a button in a browser? You get an event that says on click, right? Hey, that's a message. People have been doing reactive programming for so long that they forget, or they don't even realize that is exactly what reactive is. It's just that now we're proliferating that to other parts of the software where we think today that we're in control of something and that we're proactive, but we really aren't, right? It's still everything is reactive. So anyway, I hope that makes sense. A little bit of rambling, but it's a very natural way of thinking about things.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, Eagle Hansen has another question from Twitch saying, what are your preferred tactical patterns for building DDD systems? How can we make sure that we don't get into this habit of doing more than we should and just creating a big ball of mud? Are there specific things that we should keep in mind as we're designing our systems?
Well, the big ball of mud has less to do with the tactical tools that you use and more about the conversations that you have. And the big ball of mud is generally caused by having too many conversations in one place and having, 5 experts from different areas of the business having conversations all together, and we don't recognize the boundaries, and we just keep pushing things into the same place. And then we start duplicating things where we thought there was nothing like this elsewhere, so we duplicate the knowledge, right? Which is really what we should be actually preventing. Don't repeat yourself, because it's the knowledge that is getting leaked to other places. It's not. People think about dry as code related, right? But it's not. It's not code. It's code if the code does exactly holds and reflects the same knowledge that it does somewhere else. So these things, just this fracturing and tangle and so forth, all happens very much in terms of just not knowing where the conversational boundaries are. Really, as long as the tactical tools that you use are able to express the conversations in a meaningful way to the team of business people and developers, then it's all useful.
And speaking of tools, I understand you've got a collection of open source tools that can help with that. Is that correct?
Yes. So if you see my background here, we've got a startup company called Vlingo, which is well, it has the word lingo in it, right? So it's very much about language, ubiquitous language, and we have a product named Zoom, and Zoom is, and it's XOOM, so it's not like the Zoom communication software that we're using right now, but this is it's an SDK, which actually has, it's kind of unique and, well, very unique in the sense that you start out with some high-level designs using a visual designer, not at all, limiting or constraining. And then you actually start out in sort of a low-code mode, right? But then when you're happy about it, you can take over in full code mode and do the full software lifecycle. So, but the point of this is to actually lift all of the overhead of the surrounding architectural mechanisms that usually we spend way too much time implementing. We just make those work for you, even to the point where an incoming REST request or an incoming delivery of an event from a message broker or a message bus is automatically translated and dispatched onto the domain model for you. So literally all you have to do is think about the domain model and what are the business rules? Why does this make sense? And then even to the point where you now need to put an event in the database, right? Emit an event from an aggregator entity, so a tactical tool, into a journal, and then that not only gets persisted for you, but potentially that event will get broadcast out to others, published out to others. And even now you say, okay, I've got a few hundred events flowing around the system. How do we know who depends on what, and how do we keep the versioning correct between them and so forth? Well, we have a schema registry with Zoom that maintains the versions, and so it's sort of a neutral language, call it a DSL if you will, but a textual language that goes into the schema registry. But when someone depends on that, it comes out in a language specific implementation, and it's just compiled in with your code in a special place where you can use it, but you can't change it, right? And now you have all the benefits of type safety and version control over the languages that are being exchanged, right, between bounded contexts. And then again, the automatic translation of, okay, someone else's language is incoming on a message. Oh, what do I do with that? Well, I'm going to translate that to a command, right, from an event to a command in our language, and I'll just dispatch that automatically to the domain model, and you don't even have to think about it. You literally don't have to do that work. Now, at some point, when you're happy with that sort of low-code environment that you're working in, then you just take over with the full source code to the service, and now you can start, if you need to add more event dependencies from other contexts later on, well, you can just add those in. But now you have a lot of examples, and we even comment the code all over the place with links into our documentation that explains, okay, how, well, what do I do here? How does this work? Well, you just go directly to docs.vlingo.io and you read the Zoom documentation. Cool.
Yeah. What resources would you have for people who are maybe trying to get into DDD or Reactive? Some of the topics we have. I know you mentioned that you have some workshops that you do. What would that be something that would be good for our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've taught thousands of people. I don't, we don't have a count of how many people I've actually taught, but I, probably more than 1,000 already since the lockdown occurred, and virtually online, but even more than that before. And I teach anything from implementing domain-driven design, which is based on the work that I did in my red book of the same name. It's kind of my flagship workshop. It's 4 half days virtually online. I have a number of other ones, event-driven architecture, innovation, with event-driven architecture, so forth. And that's like a 2 half day workshop. So, and I teach a reactive Ddd workshop that actually we sell that at a very low cost, because it's, to us, it's really important to get this message about reactive out there, because it's not just good for, local optimization. It's actually good for global optimization. When you think about that, you can run software at maximum efficiency. We're going exactly in the opposite direction of Bitcoin, right, of blockchain, right? Blockchain's like using all the energy on the planet. Not really, but, like if you just think about what blockchain is doing in that way, we're going in the opposite direction with Zoom. So, and so we just want people to know about this, that it's really the way that computers were meant to be run since about 2003. Now we're 18 years in, and most people are still not doing that the right way.
Yeah.
So my workshops definitely, I have 3 books already published, 2 of them specifically on DDD, another one on the actor model, which is reactive. And then I have a 4th book along with my co-author, Tomasz Jaskula in Paris. And this book is entitled Strategic Monoliths and Microservices Driving Change with Purposeful Architecture. So this is really showing that the real story of why software should be used is for innovation. Right? We need to drive business innovation with software. And let's get real with each other. If a well modularized monolith works well for you and microservices don't, use it.
Absolutely.
Right? Don't waste your company's money just having fun experimenting with technique. Instead, experiment with the business. Make the business core those brain cells that you're using to try to tackle. I'm sorry, I don't want to offend anyone, but Kubernetes, right? You're trying to get Kubernetes to work for you and your company, and it's like, wow, we just keep hitting our heads on this, and they should really hire John Ash instead to help them with that, right? So they get John Ash to help them. Then they can just spend their time, making the business the challenge, right? I mean, that means you're less, how can I put it? You're sort of less, rock star coder than you are Thomas Edison, right? You're more Thomas Edison and Tesla and people like that now, right? Because you're thinking in that direction. Alexander Graham Bell and whoever was innovative around messaging, light, whatever, in the early days, that's what you can be with software, and it's what you should be with software.
That's fantastic.
And before hitting record, you had mentioned that you're also an Addison Wesley Pearson signature author.
Yes. So my current book that we're just finishing now, the one I just mentioned, Strategic Monoliths and Microservices, is within a signature series that I was so privileged to be asked by Pearson and Addison Wesley to be the editor of my own signature series. And I have to say, it's embarrassing to me to think about the names that and the very influential 3 other people that have signature series with them, as Kent Beck, Martin Fowler, and Mike Cohen. And I got a lot to live up to. I'm not even going to claim that I can, but we are working hard to make the very best book series that we can possibly produce on the general theme of organic software development, organic architecture, right? Where you cannot be right and perfect, well, never be perfect, but you can't be all-encompassing, innovative, all in one point. You can't even have your bounded context absolutely correct right now, but organically you can, right? And it's sort of like, I describe it as a scientist who just keeps their, so we have to keep our lab jackets and pocket protectors in, and and just keep experimenting, and we find the right way. And hey, again, that's what a true scientist and innovator does, right? Is they experiment. That's how all the really, true innovators and inventors of the past have done things. They just keep trying. They don't give up, like the Wright brothers, right? I mean, what if they had given up on the third crash,
Yep.
What if Elon Musk had given up on the third crash?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, he, which I learned recently from Mary Poppendike, who has been so kind as to write the foreword for our book and also reviewed our book very critically. I have to say, she is one fantastic, software developer and engineer, and that is the key, engineer, right? And Mary Poppendike, said, I made a sort of funny off-the-cuff statement about, that not very much has really been accomplished with rocket science since the 1960s. And she was like, Vaughn, you are so wrong. and the point, my point was, considering all the progress that have been made in other areas and innovation in other areas, not so much. But when she really drew my attention to what SpaceX has accomplished, it's mind-boggling. And her point was, do you know how many rockets they crashed to get there?
Yep.
And that a government contractor would probably never be permitted to do that.
Yep, absolutely.
Not even one. If they crashed one rocket, out, right? I mean, very likely. And if not one, two, that's the end. So, but instead, SpaceX, they just said, hey, if we got to crash rockets, it's so we can learn what works and what doesn't work. And even recently, right? I mean, they didn't crash the rocket, but it blew up.
Yep.
Some minutes after it landed. And you know what? They're going to learn something from that. And not going to. They already have, no doubt. Yeah. So, and what have they done? They own the space delivery business now, right? They own it. Nobody can touch them. So, anyway, where did we start out? Oh, yeah, my signature series. So, yes, think of every book as having that mindset in different sort of technical and methodological or, paradigm sorts of areas. And that's where we're going. And I think, we're going to help a lot of people through this, which really thrills me.
Cool.
So what has been helpful in your career that you might share with those just getting started or those looking to level up their own careers?
Be willing to change, Some people call it reinventing themselves. I don't know that that's really the case. It's really more like just becoming a better you in different circumstances, right? Circumstances change all the time. And if the past year hasn't proved that to us, nothing will, right? So anybody who has survived this has become a better version of ourselves with the new circumstances that we face. And when those new circumstances are technology, face them courageously, right? Be determined that you're going to win, right, in this or succeed in this. And then, but with humility, knowing that you need help and that people are here to help and that teams do better work than individuals, then you can all grow together. But one of the biggest pieces of advice that I can give any software developer is you really have to sort of get out of the introvert hang up, right? It's not that you aren't an introvert. I'm an introvert.
Yeah.
And you can already say, no way, he's talking too much to be an introvert. Way too much. Like, I'm sick of listening to him, and he's claiming to be an introvert. I'm an introvert, but I have learned to overcome those things. And I will be exhausted after this conversation. I will be. I'll just go take a nap or something. But hey, I make it work for what I need to do, and everybody else can do that. Get out of the cubicle, so to speak, go talk to business people, find a way to get along with them, make a partnership for innovation's sake, right? And really, like Mark Andreessen says, what is it, 11, 12 years ago now, software is eating the world. Well, yes and no. Software is eating the world in one case, and it's eating businesses in other cases, in that, right, the business that's trying to succeed with this is just going in the wrong way because they think that they can separate business people and software developers and throw things over the cubicles to the software developers, or the other way around, and it's all just going to work out. And how many times has that failed before people are going to learn that it doesn't actually work? So
I also identify as an introvert, which is exactly why we do the podcast and we do a meetup. And when we were able to, we spoke at conferences. You have to get out there and just get used to talking to people, in order to do a better job at your job.
And pretty soon nobody can tell, even though you'll be exhausted after, like the wood. So, but nobody can tell. They're like, wow, those guys, how did they do that? How did they become programmers when they already knew how to talk to people? Well, we didn't.
So where can our listeners go to follow you and just sort of keep up with what you're working on?
Yeah, so on Twitter, I am at Vaughn Vernon, and I am sorry that my name is so difficult maybe to think of, remember, and so forth, but that is it. VAUGHNVERNON.
Awesome.
Initial caps. And on LinkedIn, I'm the same /in/ and then all lowercase Vaughn Vernon. And of course, go take a look at github.com/vlingo or vlingo, and then also github.com/vlingo-net for the .NET edition. So we support the JVM and .NET C# right now. We'll also include F# support. And you're going to be amazed at how productive you can be with our tool set, our SDK.
Cool.
All right, Vaughn, thanks so much. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today.
Oh, thank you guys. Thanks for inviting me. It's been a real privilege.
All right, chat, hang out just a minute. If you've got additional questions, Vaughn was kind enough to say he would stick around for a few minutes. So we'll let him get to his nap and recovery from being an introvert. So just go ahead and drop your questions in chat, and we will wrap up the recording of the podcast. We will be coordinating the date for the podcast episode to air, so look for that in your podcast apps in the next few weeks. With that, where did we end off? That was Vaughn Vernon. Vaughn is an entrepreneur, software developer, and architect with more than 35 years of experience in a broad range of business domains. Vaughn is a leading expert in domain-driven design and reactive, and a champion of simplicity.
If you like this episode, please like, rate, and review on iTunes.
Find show notes, blog posts, and more at sixfiguredev.com.
Catch us live each week on Twitch, and be sure to follow us on Twitter at sixfiguredev.
This has been another episode of the Six Figure Developer Podcast, helping others reach their potential. I'm John Calloway.
I'm Clayton Hunt.
And I'm John Ash.
And that is how the sausage is made, everyone.
Yeah, the worst stumble is when we sign out as Clayton. So
yes, We are all Clayton. Yeah, and Vaughn, you mentioned the introvert. I think we all identify as introverts. Last time I took one of those tests, I scored 100% introvert. So I don't rarely score 100 on anything, but I'll take it.
Yeah, it's amazing. So are we totally offline now, or people are still hanging out? Or?
We are still broadcasting on Twitch. The recording of the podcast is done.
Okay.
So don't speak bad of .NET developers just yet. Code Sean is asking, does Vaughn speak at user groups? I wonder why he might be asking if you speak at Tulsa user group. Is that right, Tulsa?
Sure.
Yeah. Do you do? I would imagine you mentioned you've been doing quite a bit of training through the pandemic and things like that.
Yeah. Frankly, I welcome any opportunities to share what I know, and I very often give to communities whenever I can. I have a few meetups, user group things coming up in the next few months. So yeah, I had to say no, or at least postpone for the past few months because I just had so much going on. I couldn't handle it all. So
yeah.
But yeah, I definitely will. Tulsa. I don't think I've ever been to Tulsa, but my, if you ever heard of the Cowboy Logic in my red book, Implementing Domain-Driven Design, the Cowboys in there. Mm-hmm. So LB, unfortunately, passed away a few years back. One of my dad's best friends, who's also a cowboy, was in Tulsa. So, yeah. But I never went out there. It always had to do with horse trading. So my dad would drive his horse trailer out, or, pickup truck and horse trailer out there, and he and LB would have, some beers, of course. And,
yeah. And so. Eagle Hansen is asking, how is the product support for .NET Core?
We actually, we were on .NET Core, but there's been a recent change with .NET. I think we were standardized on .NET Core 2.1 or something like that. But now, isn't it all just going back together again? Like framework, core, whatever, is all just merging kind of back together. So whatever that is what we're going to do. It may still be based on Core 2.1. But just go check it out. And actually, my co-author and our business partner, Tomasz Jaskula, he's in Paris, and he is a very, he's one of the best .NET people you can find.
Oh, nice.
And so he can answer all those questions for you. I will say that the .NET version is not quite up to the Java version. It's always, it started probably about 6 months after the Java version did. And they unfortunately haven't had as many contributors as the Java side has. So, but we are catching up, and we are literally just, inches away from being full parity with, on .NET side.
Yeah, I've worked with a number of teams that are more concerned with creating their frameworks from the ground up. So they'll spend the first 6 months of a project creating just the base framework for everything that will eventually house the application that provides the value that they're ultimately hired to do. So looking to simplify that is phenomenal.
Yeah, and you do get, from Zoom, Lingo Zoom, you do get the full reactive benefits without really trying.
Yeah.
So we tuck all those details away without language support. We just use the core, whatever Java foundation or .NET foundation, and other than that, it's not in your face. The reactive, the async part of it, but you still get all the benefits.
Okay. And Long Boolean is asking, why DDD, why TDD? preface it with maybe too big of a question, so we'll let you decide. Why DDD? Why TDD? Why MVC? Why acronyms? And why do lots of people gravitate towards this, in your opinion?
I'm not sure how to answer that question. I'm not quite sure what it means. So why DDD? Well, hopefully, if you were listening, I just explained that quite a bit. So I won't. If you didn't hear it, then probably you want to go listen to the recording. Why TDD? I think test first is a good thing. I'm not certain that TDD is something that I aspire to do specifically, because I'm not certain that TDD actually involves the business as much as it just does tech, like the programmer or the person writing the code. And so test first is good. And I'm not sold on TDD, but I'm not against it. And the other thing you have to understand about me is, I'm in my 38th year of software development. So I started in another universe, really. There was no test-driven nothing, not even automated test. You wanted your stuff tested, you stayed up, late at night, like hitting every screen or every whatever that you could. And so it was all more like manual integration tests, and things like that. And it was that way for a long time. I probably was one of the earliest users of automated tests. If you go way back to, what is it called, SPA Robot or something like that. There was a test tool that was screen driven, so it could drive your UI for you and do all this stuff that a human would normally do, but you do that online. And then I started using unit tests around the same time, maybe slightly later, can't remember. So that's all good stuff, but I don't, when you're brought up with TDD and you learn it as a young programmer, it's much easier to accept as the right thing to do. But I think I just need more convincing. But I do think that test first and unit test is essential. Now, what was the other part of the question? Why other things?
So MVC was in there. Why all the acronyms? Why do people gravitate towards this, in your opinion?
Oh, well, are they even acronyms? I don't think they are. They're just initials for things that, have long names that we get tired of saying all the time. So that's all. Model view controller.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. Ask Trygve, I forget he's Swedish or Danish. He worked on the original Smalltalk team. I think he's still doing stuff. I think his thing is, what is that called? DSI? I think his thing is DSI now, right? So yeah, just go ask him. I don't know. I don't know who came up with the idea, but it was clear that it was smart to separate the user interface, the user interactions, and the model of what you were actually, creating a mental model from, in software. I think it makes sense. I've seen it done otherwise. In another Smalltalk, Digitalk Smalltalk, they had what was called View Manager, and they actually smashed the controller into the UI part, and so you only had the view, this View Manager and the model, and so that was actually pretty good too, because there was one less piece to worry about. They just kind of, and that's probably very much like View Model. What you think of as View Model was their View Manager, or what maybe the original View Model was View Manager.
Yeah,
I think
with all the MV star stuff, I think somebody was like, "Oh, that's a neat pattern. but it doesn't quite work for what I'm trying to do. So I'll just jam it in there.
Yeah, and I think long Boolean is clarifying, but I think it ultimately boils down to we're doing the best we can, and there are certain patterns that have kind of bubbled up as these are good ways to work. Maybe not the way, but a way. Just like the Gang of Four patterns, these are ways to communicate the things that we've decided are like things, and just giving them a name for easier communication between amongst developers, saying that this is that pattern, so that we don't have to describe in paragraph form the thing we're implementing.
Yeah, and again, DDD is a pattern language, right? You can call it whatever you want to, but it's clearly a pattern language. And so a pattern language means a number of patterns that together form a language where you can talk about multiple patterns in a single sentence, and everybody who's familiar with that language knows what you're talking about.
One of the questions that I did get to ask earlier, you were talking a lot about sort of, we were talking about the sort of the mud and clarifying that, and when you kind of brought up the topic where you can have multiple people and they're all talking, maybe they're saying the same thing. You use the count as an example, and then someone else is talking about a count, and we all use the same words. And this is, I think, one of the areas where we can get really confused. Is it's sometimes very difficult to recognize when someone, because we're all saying the same word, means something different. And so what are some of the tips and tricks that you would say to recognize those situations when all of a sudden someone else now begins to talk about something that's outside of a different context, that belongs in a different context, and say, hey, no, that's something separate? Yeah.
That's a very good question, and actually a good reminder of some advice that I have is talk to the business about their business capabilities. Right? What are your business capabilities? And don't mistake those for business processes. Capabilities are nouns. That means this is what we do in our business. It doesn't say how we do it, but it says our business operates with these capabilities. And these specific capabilities are core to us. If we didn't do these things in a very unique way, we wouldn't have a market lead or some, whatever. And then you will find that the conversations that occur in those very specific business capabilities will be different than those in others. So for example, think of an airline company. An airline company, how many different ways can an airline company discuss a flight or even an aircraft? Right? Okay, and for us, we just go like, well, I know what an aircraft is. I used to be able to fly places on them, but right now I can't. But yeah, we think that's a flight. Well, I mean, actually, an airline company thinks of a flight or an aircraft in many different ways. An aircraft can be inventoried. An aircraft can be grounded. An aircraft can be, scheduled for a flight. Well, wait a minute. Isn't a flight is scheduled. A flight arrives at a terminal. That's a different flight than the flight that's scheduled. You might want to think as hard, as much as you can. But a flight that's scheduled doesn't know anything about food or drinks or whatever that are going to be on the flight. But the one that arrives at a gate, that's an important part of that flight. And when are we closing the doors? And so just think about the different contexts. That's what it's all about, context that a flight or an aircraft or whoever is in, and the people that work in those areas. So like a gate attendant, right, or a gate agent. It's not even a tenant. Gate agent, right? It is sort of an official term for people that work in a terminal and go to a specific gate at a specific time and check in people for flights and help them get their routing rearranged or whatever happens. So those agents, they're very specific to that kind of a flight, but they probably don't know anything about scheduling or not much.
Yeah.
If you've ever been, I've actually been in a scheduling environment, wow, that's complicated. That's complicated stuff, because they're constantly, I've worked in a few of these cases, but they're literally in contact as humans with each other all the time, because they're making trades like, okay, I got this situation here, and what are you doing with this flight? And, can we do, and it's like an auction or something, constant. So, like, what is a gate agent going to know about that? They're just like, make sure an airplane shows up here,
Yeah.
So.
Well, Vaughn, this has been great, and I'm sure we could do this all night, but want to be respectful of your time. I wonder if we might have time for one more question, though, and then we can call it quits and just say thanks for coming on. So one of the questions, another question from Eagle Hansen was, how do you discover a domain with the business? I think we've often had conversations ourselves of, how do you go about getting requirements, having those conversations on what the domain models need to look like, and what the events and the capabilities and everything you were just discussing as well.
Well, I mean, yeah, the capability is a really good hint. But, typically an analyst will tend to be a proxy between the real business expert, the real subject matter expert, and the software development team. And that proxy, the best way to describe it is like a telephone game, right? Telephone game. Just add one more person in between, and you got a different story. And it's hard enough just to get two people to understand each other, talking directly, from two different worlds, so to speak. This mental model of programming and bits and bytes and, whatever libraries, and this person over here that just needs to schedule flights, and they need all the tools that they can to make this complex auctioneering 10 hours, 12, whatever per day work out. And just communicating that to one person is difficult enough without putting, a proxy in between. So just try to eliminate proxies and recognize that if two business people start sort of arguing or disagreeing about something, they're probably both right. They're just in different contexts.
Yeah. Interesting.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Is so, just a little advice there. Of course, there can be a lot more to it. Like you said, we could keep talking about this, but let's not. Didn't they say something like that in Kentucky? Let's not, and say we did.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, Vaughn, this has really been great. Really do appreciate it. Yes. Chat, if you want to learn more about Vaughn or from Vaughn, be sure to follow on Twitter, hit up the website, and buy the books and schedule the trainings. This has been fantastic. Look for the cleaned up episode in your podcast app in the coming weeks. We'll get that scheduled. And with that, we will be back on Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern for the live coding, and back next Monday, 6 p.m. Eastern for the live recording of the podcast. And we will rate our friend over at Mastermind.io and say goodnight, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Yeah.